Do you know why you're homeschooling, even when things seem hard and you have endless friction in almost every homeschool day? Or perhaps you were really questioning what next year looks like for your homeschool. Or maybe you're at the point of wondering if this homeschooling thing, is actually something that's cut out for you. If any of those sound familiar, I want to encourage you to stay right here with me over the next 20 minutes or so as I walk through some very important reasons why we homeschool. And to be honest with you, most of us don't even think about the several reasons other than one. And I blame that one on the educational system that we all seem to be held bondage by. So stay with me as I teach you today. I'm Dollie Freeman. I am the creator of the Charlotte Mason planning framework, and the host of the Charlotte Mason Mastery Show. So I hope you stay with me over the next 20 minutes or so, and let me help you with today's topic. Today, I'm going to be teaching you a really important aspect of anyone who's thinking about homeschooling, and that is understanding the four soul ends of education. So if you're homeschooling, I want to ask you right now, I want you to think, post it in the comments if you can, why do you homeschool? If you can answer this question, you may be better at understanding these four soul ends of education. But I want you to start processing that question yourself and bring me into the conversation by posting in the comments. And if you know anyone who would benefit from this, tag them in the comments as well and invite them to be your learning buddy for today's episode. Now, the four soul ends of education is based on Charlotte Mason's quote. I want to share this quote with you as you're processing this question for yourself of why you homeschool. Let me share with you a little bit of what Charlotte Mason said. Thought breeds thought. Children familiar with great thoughts take as naturally to thinking for themselves as the well-nourished body takes to growing. And we must bear in mind that growth, physical, intellectual, moral, spiritual, is the soul end of education. And as you can see here, I bolded those four parts: physical, intellectual, moral, and spiritual. We're going to be talking about these in today's episode to help you get a better understand about how these should be processed as you're thinking about why you homeschool. I'm going to get into the comments at the end of this, but I want to help you process so that you can better understand why you homeschool. So on those hard and difficult days when you're just feeling like you're in the trenches and there's endless friction, that you have a purpose to keep going and keep moving forward while you kind of move through that process of how to get rid of some of that endless friction. So let's get started with the very first thing. Let's talk about this. Physical. I want you to think of physical as the body. Charlotte Mason was an educator who really wanted us to focus on the body as an education. In fact, she tells us that we should be planning each day 30 minutes of drills and exercise as part of a homeschool curriculum. If you're not doing that, that's as simple as getting outside with your children or encouraging them to ride their bikes, rollerblades, throw the ball, doing anything that moves their body, climbing trees, going on nature walks. It's pretty simple to get those 30 minutes in. The more, the merrier, but 30 minutes was part of that lesson. And what you'll find is when you give the children those 30 minutes, they'll tend to be more active themselves and actually love to be mobile. So Charlotte Mason wants us, for the soul end of education, to be about physical, them not only understanding about how to be physical, but understanding about their body. Giving them an understanding that their body is going to help them be able to go places and do things, and it's important to keep them moving. So this is the first thing. And if you have little ones that are before the formal years of education, their physical body is pretty much in motion all the time. A difference between motion and training the muscles is what you provide for your children. So not just being busy around the day, because anyone can be busy, but it's really building those muscles, helping your children to understand, riding the bike focuses on the legs and endurance, doing certain exercise for the heart, doing certain cardio exercises, what I'm talking about with the heart, getting them focused on why we move a certain way and building muscle, lean muscle. I'm not talking bulk muscle. I'm not talking weightlifting. I'm talking about really being moving. So this is the first part of the soul end of education that Charlotte Mason was talking about in the quote that I just shared. The second part is intellectual, the knowledge. Let's be honest, almost everybody I speak to when I say, so why do you homeschool? It's for the knowledge, is to make sure their children are able to learn, because they either are struggling in school, or they're not learning the right things, or they're being taught the wrong things. And so when you get the understanding that most people homeschool for knowledge, we can really see that this one sole end of education is pretty much the focus of most homeschools. Now, what's important is there's a difference between a straight A student who is a learner that is cramming for tests and one that is being raised as self-educating, meaning they're retaining their education and being able to use it into adulthood and beyond. So when we think of knowledge in the Charlotte Mason way, I want you to think of self-knowledge. I want you to be thinking of self-education. I don't want you to be thinking of the whole educational system, which is why I said at the beginning of the show is I blame the educational system for this is the purpose that most people homeschool. What you want to understand is we have the option and the privilege of giving our children this self-education that looks so different to knowledge as those that are in the educational system. So intellectual is this second sole end of education. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what Charlotte Mason said about moral. This is her character. And this is where she says often that when you give your children wholesome curriculum, wholesome ideas, that their character will be formed in it. The moral of the story, if you've ever heard that, when you've read literature, what's the moral of the story? What's the character we can take out of this? Aesop's Fables are an awesome book to be teaching your children at a very young age, these small little stories that always has a moral behind it. These are the characters. This is introducing your children to the design that you want to have for them as you're growing your children, maturing your children into adults. Remember, we're raising adults. We're not raising children. One day they will become an adult. When we plant the seeds in the garden, we are not saying, I'm raising tomato seeds. No, we say, I'm raising tomatoes. And we need to understand that. And the moral, the end of a child's education should be about the character that they have. Charlotte Mason says it's not about the end of the education of how much they know, but how much they care. That's what I love about Charlotte Mason, is it really gets to the heart of a child. And so the third sole end of education is character. What are you doing in your planning that will help mold the character that you desire for your children? That's what I want you to be thinking about right now. How can you plan it? Charlotte Mason says when you give wholesome curriculum, everything else will take care of itself. And that's what she's talking about with the morals. So in today's educational system, there's a lot of bad morals being taught as part of the curriculum. And it works. It works to erode the character of a child. And we can do the same thing, but in a positive way by giving them the right thing for character. So the fourth thing is spiritual. And she's talking here about the conduct. And not a lot of people like to talk about the religious side of Charlotte Mason because, let's face it, there's a lot of secular people out there using Charlotte Mason. But to be truly mastering Charlotte Mason, we have to look at the spiritual side of what she teaches. Charlotte Mason was a Christian who very much relied on the knowledge of God. That was something she expected her students to learn, the knowledge of God. And in doing so, recognize the duty that we have as people to follow his laws and his ways. And so giving our children that understanding spiritually will then help them build that conduct they need as they get into adulthood. One of the biggest examples I can give you of how spiritual education, the soul end of education, works with your children in homeschool is when we're teaching spiritually to our children, they're going to grow up having different ideas about what it's like to be in a relationship with the opposite gender, being able to understand that we conduct ourselves differently than those who have no spiritual guidance. And so when you see just that one aspect, we don't teach the way that the public schools will teach this. It would look completely different. So when you bring in spiritual training into your children as a part of their soul end of education, you're going to have to bring in that spiritual part because it will make a difference in how they're acting, their conduct. So these are the four soul ends of education. I'm going to review them for you. So it's physical, and that's the body. It's intellectual, that's the knowledge. It's moral, that's the character. And then it's spiritual, and that's the conduct. Let me review the quote by Charlotte Mason for any of you who may have missed the first part of this, because this is what this is all based on. Thoughts breeds thought. Children familiar with great thoughts take as naturally to thinking for themselves as the well-nurtured body takes to growing. And we must bear in mind that growth, physical, intellectual, moral, spiritual, is the soul end of education. So as you're thinking about next school year and you're planning things out, I want you to realize those four areas are things that you need to be thinking about. Not just the academics, not just the intellectual. We need to be thinking of the whole part of the child, the body, intellectual, the spiritual, as well as the moral. We need to be thinking of these things. So that will help you as you're planning. Now, speaking of planning, I've got something for you. So if you have yet to download this 20+ page resource that is full, there's no fill in the blanks, there's no nothing in here. And this is to help you to understand what you need to be doing in planning your homeschooling, regardless if you're doing Charlotte Mason or not. This will help you fill it out. And in it, there are action assignments that will help you to actually process your things for your home. Let's see. Yeah, you can see that. So this will help you as well. Now, let me show you how to get this. So you can discover the art of designing your own curriculum. I take you from the very beginning. You're going to have to go through 3 decisions of what you need for your homeschooling, what you desire for your homeschooling. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what that looks like to get to the point where you're able to plan for your homeschooling. So you can download this at charlottemasonmastery.com/kit. This is an amazing resource. I've been getting responses telling me, thank you. This has helped me so much. The decisions in here, there's 3 decisions you're going to be making, are perfect conversation starters with your spouse. So if your spouse is not on board yet with homeschooling, this is a great place to start to help them get there. If you are at the point where you know you want to homeschool, but you don't really know what that looks like, this will help you get there. It'll help you understand the options to curriculum. It'll help you to really plan out what it looks like for your homeschooling before you really get into too much of the curriculum part of it. There's a lot of decisions to be made before you get there. All right, so now let me tell you, next episode, we're going to be talking about the 7 steps to design your own curriculum. This is something you don't want to miss. This will really help you if you're stuck in that box curriculum and you really want to do a delightful education for your child and you really don't know how. I'm going to walk you through those 7 steps. But guess what? They're inside this too. So you can get a head start and then come back and join me on Wednesday next week at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'd love to help you process that. All right, so it's question time. So if you have a question, post it in the comments. I'm getting into the comments here. So I love interaction. Post your comments, your aha moments, anything that I can help you with. I'd love to be there. Hello, Anna. Nice to see you here. To have an education for my children that is well-rounded and prepares them for the world, not just academics. Well, look at that, Anna. You nailed it before you even heard everything. But yes, we have to understand our why. And when we think that we want our children to be well-educated or straight A's, we've missed the mark. We have to realize that children need all four of them. And I know way too many families, and this is really sad to me, but I know way too many families who have done all they thought was possible to raise their children with their faith and with their political views and all of these aspects all the way through high school. And they really thought they had nailed it. And then the children graduated and went off to college and universities, and they walked away from their faith. They were Christians when they left their home. Within their first, I don't know if it was the first semester or even sooner, they came back home as evolutionists and atheists, denouncing their parents' faith. They came back with, switching political views to the extremes. And this is not just a handful. This is a real issue in the homeschool community. When I say it's not just a handful, sadly, I know dozens of people that this has happened to. And that's just those that I'm privy to knowing the situation. So I want you to know these four sole ends of education is really important if you want more than good grades for your children and to get into that choice of college. So I really want you to think about those things. I'm not seeing any questions today, which is good. I know today was one of those things that just kind of makes you ponder rather than have questions. But I also want to be available for you guys on the end of these shows. So I hope this has helped you as you get into your mindset of thinking about next year. Take the time to think about those four sole ends of education. Process the Charlotte Mason post or quote that I shared, and then make sure you have this and have those discussions with those decisions with your spouse and really get a solid foundation for what your homeschool should look like as a couple. All right, you all, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next week, same time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time here on Facebook and on YouTube. Until then, bye for now.